It began with the forging of the great books. On July 29, 1954, author JRR Tolkien published the first of 3 novels that would together prove to be the definitive fantasy trilogy for decades to come. And into this trilogy he poured his genius, his empathy, and his PTSD from World War I. One trilogy to rule them all. The breadth of media inspired directly from Tolkien's work is truly incalculable. From the Chronicles of Narnia, written by friend of the author C.S. Lewis, to George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones, Stephen King's Dark Tower series, and half of Led Zeppelin's discography. Not to mention a fairly popular 1974 tabletop role-playing game called Dungeons & Dragons. But beyond serving as the jumping-off point for over 60 years of media, the famous novels also have another distinction in what is arguably the most successful adaptation of all time. And, as I'll argue over these next 3 videos, the singular greatest trilogy in the history of cinema. The film rights jumped around from United Artists to Saul Zaentz, from Rankin Bass to Miramax. Even the Beatles wanted to play the famous hobbits. But ultimately the project came to Peter Jackson, who lobbied hard for the role of director. Jackson was known at the time for low-budget horror and comedy films like Dead Alive and Meet the Feebles. How this New Zealand-born King Kong-obsessed monster nerd ended up pulling off the feat of all feats, we may never know, but as an audience member and a fellow filmmaker, I am forever indebted. In this video, we're going scene by scene through the first of these 3 movie masterpieces, and attempting, if possible, to dissect what exactly makes this the best trilogy of all time. Beginning, of course, with Part 1 of Peter Jackson's opus, Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. First things first, Howard Shore is a god. Right off the bat, he sets the scene brilliantly with a combination of the most ominous, terrifying hell demon symphonies to ever grace the silver screen, along with angelic, ethereal, fluttering moth music. The narrated introduction is nothing short of perfect, 10 out of 10 tone setting, and yes, the source material is god tier, but to pack all that backstory and exposition of the ring into a 10-minute sequence, so well laid out it both satisfies die-hard fans of the novel and first-time travelers making their maiden journey into the world of Middle-earth, is no easy feat. And credit goes to screenwriters Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyens, who, with the help of Jackson, sent drafts back and forth for months and even into production to make sure every scene, every page, every word felt like the Shakespearean poetry it was destined to be. The cinematography is unbelievable, particularly in the moonlit cave, but as the film goes on, it just gets exponentially more impressive and expansive. In an incredible tone switch, Shore's score brings us from terror and mayhem to the soft, lilting tune of the Shire. This is where the majesty of New Zealand stands on full display. As mentioned, Peter Jackson was far from an obvious choice in helming this project, but I have to think his pitch included his home country. However, the transition from the introductory narration to the ordinary world is not only smooth as silk, it sets up the stakes immediately. We know the potential scope of the danger, and now we see an idyllic land, home to a great many barefooted beasts with a heart of gold and a belly of potatoes.
Potatoes!
And instantly we're hooked. We are with these hairy halflings. We've met exactly none of them, and we already fear for their well-being, not just for their sake, for the time will soon come when hobbits will shape the fortunes of all. Our first interaction with Frodo and Gandalf is a very specific trope that has thankfully died out over the last few years. You know, where 2 old friends are meeting again for the first time in a long while, and because they know we're watching them, and don't know their relationship yet, they greet each other with feigned hostility.
A wizard is never late, Frodo Baggins. He arrives precisely when he means to.
Only to playfully break character and greet one another the way a normal person would have done in the first place. It's an effective trope, and perhaps never done better than here, but please, for the love of all that is precious, stop doing that. Gandalf, of course, is played by the brilliant Ian McKellen, and our unlikely hero, Frodo Baggins, is played by the incredibly expressive Elijah Wood, who will wear wigs when required.
Do you wear wigs?
No, I do not.
Have you worn wigs?
No, I have not.
Will you wear wigs?
Maybe.
When will you wear wigs?
Bilbo is the GOAT. Such a funny, relatable, grouchy character. He's 111, but he doesn't look it thanks to what he's got in his pocket. The party is great. The speech is hilarious.
I don't know half of you half as well as I should like, and I like less than half of you half as well as you deserve.
And here we meet the film's two best characters, Merry and Pippin, played by Dominic Monaghan, who you may remember as the bassist of Drive Shaft, right? No, nobody recognizes a bassist. The writers lost went too far into fantasy with that one.
When I was getting ready to go out, they said, you'll be travelling with someone called Orlando Bloom. I see this guy, you know, and I thought, he looks elf-like.
And this wee fella walked over and he said,
You wouldn't be Orlando Bloom, would you? He said, Billy!
and I was like, oh my God, you're a hobbit. And we just had this huge embrace.
And it was my birthday as well. I'd just turned 30 that day. So we had champagne on the flight. And then when we got to LA, because of the time difference, it was my birthday again. So we had more champagne.
Bilbo shocks everyone by disappearing after his speech, only to be surprised by Gandalf back at his house. The scenes with Gandalf and the hobbits in Bag End were all done using forced perspective to make McKellen seem much larger and the lads look fun-sized.
Often we filmed in two different scale sets, so Bag End was built in a large size scale for Ian Holm to appear in and a small scale for Ian McKellen to walk through.
Then we see it. Mine's a tale that can't be told. My freedom I hold dear. How years ago, in days of old, when magic filled the air. These are the words of Robert Plant, lead singer of Led Zeppelin on their 1969 track, Ramble On.
Just in the darkest depths of Mordor, I met a girl so fair.
But Gollum and the evil one crept up and slipped away with her. Well, more accurately, Gollum is tortured for information, and amidst the utterly unbelievable score, two words are uttered. Frodo's intro to the ring is a spectacular example of furthering exposition in a meaningful way. The sequence is subtle, but the weight of it all is so palpable, so delicately laid out, yet it moves quickly and with expert efficiency. Now our hero knows more than most, though he's no more equipped. At least he can take comfort in knowing that Sauron was destroyed.
You sure about that? You sure about that?
This is no easy task. Even Gandalf can't hold on to the ring. So, he asks Frodo to hold it, to keep it secret, to keep it safe. And the unlikeliest of creatures takes on the task, just as Bilbo did some years before, and readies himself to set out on his own adventure. Sam drops some Eve, joining the quest in the form of Sean Astin, son of the original Gomez Addams and star of such films as Rudy and The Goonies. But perhaps the most venerable of the entire cast is the great late Christopher Lee, Dracula himself. Lee was a member of the Royal Air Force during World War II, and a cousin to author Ian Fleming, who later used the actor as inspiration for a character he named James Bond. Christopher Lee was the only cast member to have met Tolkien, and knew the books better than any of the rest. He holds the Guinness World Record for most acting roles with 275 film credits and 75 television appearances. He was also an operatic singer who recorded a heavy metal Christmas album at the age of 90 before the universe demanded he stop living so many lifetimes in one and finally took him out. Lee famously instructed Peter Jackson on how to correctly replicate the sound a man makes when he's stabbed in the back, something he had himself witnessed in war. Or possibly done himself. The battle between Gandalf and Saruman is incredibly cool, even if the twist of the White Wizard's betrayal and the fear of losing Gandalf gets in the way of fully appreciating it.
When did Saruman the Wise abandon reason for madness?
Merry and Pippin getting added onto the journey is the best thing that could have possibly happened. We get a sick Hitchcock tear reverse dolly zoom shot on the tree line to signify evil is approaching, and then our first run-in with the Black Riders, as the boys hide under a tree root. The sound design here is unreal. Every aspect of the filmmaking is a 10 out of 10, both on the surface and below. From a character and story standpoint, we have another step forward as Frodo is tempted to put on the ring. And who is it that stops him? Our real hero, Sam. There are in fact 3 true heroes in this epic trilogy without whom the ring would not have been destroyed. Frodo is one, and Sam is the second. The Nazgul chases the boys to a dock, and fortunately the Hell Horse won't jump in the water, so the gang gets away. Our first Peter Jackson cameo comes in the form of a carrot-eating drunken Bree, and then we arrive at the Prancing Pony. The boys have a pint, Frodo learns Gandalf never made it, and the camera turns to a shadowy figure lurking in the corner. Strider, the Ranger of the North, watches as he puffs on a pipe.
I got a phone call at home saying, "Do you want to get on a plane tomorrow? We go to New Zealand." And I said, "For what?" And then they said, "The Lord of the Rings."
I knew that this was a very, very important conversation, that he'd never met me before, he didn't know who I was, I'd never met him, he'd never been to New Zealand before, he hadn't read the Lord of the Rings.
I just said, "Well, can I think about it for a minute?" He said, "Well, not very long, but you have till this afternoon."
And I know that the person we really have to thank for persuading Vigo was his son, Henry. I think he was about 11 or 12 years old at that time, and he was a huge fan of the Lord of the Rings, and absolutely was beside himself when he thought that his dad could get to play Aragorn.
Someone asks the boys if they know a Baggins, and Pippin stupidly gives him up. In the fuss, Frodo falls, and the ring lands magically on his finger, causing him to vanish. Strider saves Frodo, then the boys try to save Frodo from Strider, only to learn there's something far more frightening hunting them now. Then, in a classic comedy fake-out, the Nazgul stab a bunch of pillows as the gang hightails it into the night. And once everyone is safe, Aragorn learns about Hobbit feeding schedules.
What about breakfast?
We've already had it.
We've had one, yes. What about second breakfast?
The boys make a fire, Frodo freaks out and stomps it with his big-ass feet, but it's too late. The Nazgul arrive. Sam tries to fight them off himself like the absolute gangster he is. Frodo goes invisible again, but he gets stabbed anyway as the world turns Danny Phantom. Strider shows up in the nick of time to fight the Black Riders off and takes Frodo to the elves. Gandalf plays with bugs, who send for the eagles, and I try to figure out how he got on the roof like the guy in The Hangover. Now, in every good movie, you want to set the stakes and then raise them. And having shown only a glimpse of the full power of the enemy, it's time we crank things up a notch as Saruman begins building Sauron's army. Monsters break free from mucus sacs like beautiful butterflies emerging from cocoon. And then Steven Tyler's daughter shows up looking fly as hell.
Give up the halfling shield.
If you want him, come and claim him.
Arwen drowns the Nazgul with some elvish and horse waves. We start to tease a romance between her and Aragorn. Then Frodo awakens to see Gandalf, who doesn't mention anything about the eagles, but that's fine, we'll get to that. And so it comes to pass that Frodo meets Elrond, played by the legendary Hugo Weaving, and is welcomed to Rivendell, where he finds an aged Bilbo who looks thin, sort of stretched, like butter scraped over too much bread. Sounds like lembas bread to me. You know that stuff will fill you up like nothing, just as long as no fat hobbits eat it all in the night. Frodo and Sam are ready to go home, like me walking into any social function. They've done their duty of getting the ring to the elves, and their part of the story is over. Oh wait, no, there's more. Enter Boromir, played by the always dying Sean Bean, protector of Gondor, a land with no king and no need for one.
Great idea! Who needs a king? No king, no king, la 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 la.
This is when Elrond reveals he was there. It was men who chose not to destroy the ring. Ugh, men. Am I right, ladies? But what's this? Aragorn may be the heir to the king. But it's not like he has a sword. That line was broken.
It has been
No, not yet it's not. First, we have to listen to some more godly music and peep in on a Romeo and Juliet love story for the ages. Only this time, instead of being really young, they're really old. They just use a lot of lotion or something. The sacrifice doesn't mean much to us humans, who barely want to make it to 30. But trust me, in the test screening with an all-elf audience, there were gasps. The fellowship meeting is truly legendary, each member deciding to join the party one by one.
You have my sword. And you have my bow.
And my axe.
The character work in this series is outstanding. So many small moments of great importance. Frodo's immediate relief handing over the ring sells so much more than a prop could do alone. Boromir begins to argue for keeping it himself, and the rest jump in with their own ideas. Legolas notably stands up for Isildur's heir, but it's Elrond who says the ring must be destroyed, and that's when the true weight of the task begins to set in.
One does not simply walk into Mordor.
Then we see the ultimate power of the ring as the corrupting begins, and a cloud of anger envelops the secret council until finally, Frodo promises to take the ring to Mordor himself. Gandalf, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli promise to join the mission, quest, thing, and the little lads soon tag along too. After all, you can't get by with just an axe and a sword and a bow. You need intelligence.
Well, that rules you out, Nick.
And then comes one of the latest title drops in the history of movies.
You shall be the Fellowship of the Ring.
It's all settled. The journey is set in stone. The players are decided. There's only one thing left to figure out.
Where are we going?
Now, for anyone who's not a fan of jump scares, I'd advise you to look away before... Sorry. Couldn't help myself. But there's no time to panic. We've reached the mines of Moria, a dangerous place guarded by a kraken and run by the Riddler.
Speak friend and enter. What's the Elvish word for friend?
Melon. Gimli is proud to show off the mine, though he takes exception to the label given its palatial square footage. Of course, Gimli is correct. It's not a mine. It's a tomb. Another nice piece of character work here with some unbelievable dialogue. First, Frodo says it's a pity Bilbo didn't kill Gollum when he got the chance, to which Gandalf replies, "Pity?
Many that live deserve death, and some that die deserve life. Can you give it to them, Frodo?"
And if that wasn't enough of a bar for you, try this one on for size.
All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to us.
The sweet moment is ruined abruptly by Pippin's dumbass who just can't help himself but to make as much noise as hobbitly possible.
Throw yourself in next time and rid us of your stupidity.
Frodo is saved from another stabbing by the elvish armor he's now wearing under his clothes. The goblins show up just in case everything else wasn't enough, and then it gets worse as they all run away in immediate retreat. Our wizard friend knows what hellbeast is ascending to take them on, and sends the whole gang back. The Balrog approaches in fiery demon form, and the wizard bats him back with this one easy trick that sorcerers hate.
You shall not pass!
Who are you, my high school chemistry teacher? Just as it seems the beast is beaten, the whip comes cracking back and the wizard is yoinked back down to the Shadow Realm, leaving us with 3 cryptic words.
Fly, you fools!
Now we meet some more elves, including the Lady of the Wood, Galadriel, played by the one and only Cate Blanchett, who can talk to 2 people at the same time. Galadriel is tempted and fights the temptation, which is not easy considering that all would love her and despair. The design and makeup effects of the Uruk-hai are absolutely phenomenal, paired with some awesome slow-mo shots that somehow don't feel dated. Sean Bean, not usually one to lose his head, goes crazy for the ring, scaring Frodo off to continue the journey on his own. Another orc battle begins as the Uruk-hai search for the halflings. Merry and Pippin make themselves useful, distracting the orcs to help Frodo escape. And just when it seems they're next on the chopping block, Boromir saves the hobbits, then takes 100 arrows to the heart. The little ones are taken away, and Top Dog prepares to pierce Ned Stark's short range until he's jumped by the future king. The Uruk-hai demonstrates self-harm tendencies before getting his head whacked off like a soccer ball.
Do you kick balls? Mr. Woods? Mr. Woods? Do you play football? This is funny to you?
Do I kick balls?
Boromir dies in Aragorn's arms as he swears his allegiance.
I would have followed you, my brother. My captain.
Now you can't write a banger of a line and not play it twice, so we flash back to Gandalf, whose wise words sent Frodo off in a canoe.
I wish none of this had happened.
So do all who live to see such times.
Sam nearly drowns because he won't leave Frodo alone, and the duo is together again. When asked which of the 3 movies I like most, I have trouble answering. I've never put on Two Towers without watching The Fellowship first, and I've never watched The Fellowship and not finished the trilogy. It's like Kill Bill. You can break it up all you want, but it's all one cohesive piece. See, Star Wars is great, but it's easy to pick a favorite of the 3 because they're all so different. Not to mention they were each made by a different director with a different script at a different time. Lord of the Rings, and Kill Bill for that matter, were both shot all at once, so the quality is consistent from beginning to end. When it comes to making a trilogy, you're always better off having the script to all 3 finished before you shoot the first movie. Otherwise, you end up with something that looks like a bad game of ping pong. But we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about the greatest trilogy in cinema history. And one of the most clear determining factors that proves a trilogy is successful is whether or not you feel the need to watch the second movie after the first. I've watched The Fellowship late at night and told myself I was going to go to sleep. But one cannot simply watch the first movie without watching the second, and I will not abandon my subscribers to boredom and stress.